Good afternoon. I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order for March 7th, 2023. It is now 1:32. I will take responsibility for our 2-minute delay. I will welcome Deputy Mayor Melnick to that position and thank Councillor Wilson for his service over the last couple of months. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? Director of Protective and Legislative Services, Ms. Nadon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to request the addition of an in-camera item for land and legal, please.
All right, that will be agenda item 10.2. We had an in-camera item, intergovernmental in any event. Thank you for that. Councillor Demota.
Yeah, I'm not adding anything officially here. I just want to bring up item number 7, notices of motion that at our last committee of the whole meeting, I requested to have something put on our next committee of the whole agenda regarding resolutions at Alberta meetings. Just because there's deadlines concerned, and I'm just going to give you guys a heads up for the councillors that that's the last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. That doesn't sound like it requires an amendment to the agenda for today. If there is nothing else, might I have a motion from a councillor, since a director can't make a motion, that we amend the agenda for today's meeting by adding agenda item 10.2, an in-camera discussion under FOIP dealing with land and legal. Councillor Wilson, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And might I have a motion then that council approve the agenda for today's meeting as amended? Councillor Hall, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We have 2 sets of minutes. Pardon me, 3 sets of minutes to approve today. The first, the Legislative Committee meeting minutes of February 7th, 2023. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? If not, I would look to the chair of that committee to make a motion. Councillor Hall, thank you. Motion that council approve the minutes of the February 7, 2023 Legislative Committee meeting as presented. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That's carried. We also have for review and approval the minutes of the regular meeting of February 21st, 2023. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? If not, might I have a motion, please, that council approve the minutes of the February 21st, 2023 regular council meeting as presented? Councillor Waxer, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And finally, we have minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of February 28th, 2023. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes as observed by the bare quorum of members who were then present?
The bare speedy quorum.
If not, may I have a motion, please? Councillor Waxer, thank you. Motion that council approve the minutes of the February 28th, 2023 committee of the whole meeting as presented. All those in favor? There are none opposed, that is carried. That takes us to agenda item 4, correspondence. We have one letter from Parks Canada attached to the agenda. Is there any discussion with respect to that letter? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just wonder from the activities, from the revenues that were reported and the number of permits, I wonder how much of this activity was skewed by the 42-year leases coming up in Cabin Creek, where there was a huge number of inspections and leases and occupancy permits, I guess, reissued. And I just wondered how that might have skewed the revenues here and the amount of time that was used by the parks personnel to administer that lease renewal program.
Mr. Gibbon?
Your Worship, obviously, I can't speak on behalf of our colleagues at Parks Canada, but I can say that Councillor Mallick's right. I think that would have been reflected in the year-over-year increase in occupancy permits and completion certificates. But I believe that the compliance inspections the year before in 2022, or sorry, 2021 would have sort of been a leading indicator of that 42-year lease renewal. And overall, year over year, the revenue is down slightly. And so I think you're right. They obviously do work on a cyclical calendar where they go and do all these things in advance of that large lease renewal in the west end of the community. But it doesn't appear to have had a very significant uplift in their revenue. Certainly when compared to 2021, 2020 might be a bit of an aberration, given that it was the initial part of the COVID year really impacted a lot of the work that they've been doing. The other item that stood out for me that I wanted to bring to council's attention was the discussion that they have on the second page around personnel wages. And so they do describe the types of positions and the percentages of those positions that they include in these expenses. And so you can see listed there at the top of the page a portion of the municipal and realty services manager, development officers, realty/development officer, junior development officer, senior realty and development advisor, compliance officer, administrative assistant, and then a small portion of the GIS technician. So there's a pretty all-inclusive version of what Parks is allocating to this. Of course, all of these positions also appear to have other duties because none of them are 100% dedicated to the service. They also make a note that the increase in expenses is largely due to step increases, so people moving through their positions on an annual basis, and draw council's attention to the final line in that section that the collective agreement for those positions has expired, and they expect that the costs, as they go through labor negotiation, there will be some retroactive costs and potential increases that will be reflected in their cost to deliver this service going forward. While this isn't the municipality's numbers, it is something that Parks has provided previously. They've presented report with exactly the same format last year and it's provided here for council and the community.
Thank you for that. I appreciate receiving the information. I think in most jurisdictions, council would also get a costing of the value of development and building permits issued. That might be something that we could ask Parks if they're going to continue this, although there's reason to hope that maybe they won't be continuing it. But it would be interesting information. I also wanted to comment on the compliance inspections. They indicate there were 188 such inspections in 2022, but commencing January 3rd of 2023, they have indicated that compliance inspections will no longer be required. They might be required in some circumstances, but not generally. So I would expect that that number is going to come down substantially, which will affect the expense, but I don't think they ever charge for those, so it won't impact revenue, so the balance will be considerably different. Councillor Wilson.
Well, two questions, they're both related, I guess. The first one is, how does, the Realty Office go about, putting a percentage to each position? How is that recorded, in their office? Is it, I find it very difficult to be confident that there's 50% of the Realty and Municipal Services Manager, and I guess the follow-up question is that, what does this represent as full-time positions? Has anybody looked at that to like added up the percentages and compared it to what we think we will need if we take over land use plan?
Your worship, for Councillor Wilson's question, so I haven't, to pull the calculator quickly, add up those percentages to look at full-time positions. But our consultant that did a bit of a look at what the municipality might need in terms of staffing would have had access to this report from last year and did meet with Parks staff to get a bit of a sense of what their current staffing levels were. And that advice that was taken with council should be reflective of his professional opinion of the level of resourcing that the municipality would need. So I don't have that at hand right now. I do believe that it was not this number of positions. That said, all of the positions that the municipality would have would be focused 100% on delivering the service rather than, as it appears with Parks, that they have a number of different duties and responsibilities. That's certainly something that we could find for you, Councillor Wilson, or we could sort of review back in the information that was tabled by our consultants towards the end of last year.
Yeah, and I can do that myself, but I just, wanted to throw the question out there. I appreciate it. Thanks.
I wish to comment as well, just briefly on the section at the end of the letter dealing with PILT, payments in lieu of taxes. And just for completeness, the federal government pays payments in lieu of taxes to every municipality in Alberta in which there are federal properties. So I believe there are 130 communities in Alberta which receive PILT payments. Probably only 3 of them are related to Parks Canada, but it's a standard way of operating. And just for interest, Cold Lake leads the list with about $5 million in PILT payments because of the size of the presence of the federal government in Cold Lake. Interestingly, Coots, Alberta, which has been in the news, gets about $122,000 in PILT payments because of the federal border crossing. So it is not unusual. It's not anything focused particularly on Jasper or on the national park, but it does warn me to say that Parks Canada, as an arm of the federal government, does in fact make those payments in lieu of taxes, unlike another level of government, which we've discussed recently, that short pays its obligation. This is just taxation for services, and the federal government has shown an inclination to honor it and does pay it. I think, although it's gone up significantly, as they indicate, I think that was primarily because of local improvement fees for putting services in along the canal, which attached to properties still owned by the federal government. Anyway, it's just interesting to come up. But if others are reading this, it is not, PILT is restricted to payments made by Parks Canada in Jasper only. It's a broadly recognized obligation of other orders of government to pay for municipal services. Having said all that, Councillor Demota, sorry, Councillor Watts.
So that what you just said makes it possible for me to ask the question. why, what is the relationship between PILT, payment in lieu of taxes, and the land use and planning? It seems like something, two completely different things.
I believe it is, but and that's why I raise it. It's in the letter. I believe it is not connected, but it is a fact. But it's not a fact that I think is directly connected to land use planning and development or the cost thereof. It's entirely different, and that's why I made those observations. Councillor Demota.
Well, having heard that, could the intent be connected to the blurb in there about land rent? Which started off the letter, and those two kind of maybe hand in hand, one offsetting the other in some people's minds, maybe. Not sure. Doesn't make any sense to me, but the reason I rose my hand in request to speak was to maybe, while we're on this topic, question what type of communication we have out there on the municipality of Jasper's desire to potentially have control over land use and planning. And I know that starting yesterday for a month that Parks Canada is doing a survey, and on March 16th, we'll be having 2 sessions during the day on getting feedback from the community. And I'm just wondering whether we would be doing our due diligence in informing the public, the residents of Jasper, on why this would be beneficial for them. And I feel that there's some mixed feelings or misunderstandings amongst community members on what it is that we could potentially be taking on, and what the cost may be, and or whether we should be getting into this at all. But I think that it'd be worthwhile for us to maybe get ahead of it and make sure that residents know exactly what it is that we might be signing up for them. Does that make sense?
I noticed a glance in your direction, Mr. Gibbon. Do you care to respond?
Yeah, certainly. So at this stage, as council, and I think the community are well aware, the municipality requested this discussion. And late last year, Mayor Ireland and the VP of Operations for Parks Canada signed a memorandum of understanding that really set the table for an administrative working group to explore the potential for expanding the services delivered by the municipality of Jasper to include some kind of responsibility for land use planning and development. That's not defined right now. Parks is obligated to do a certain amount of and certain styles of public consultation as a part of that, because ultimately any change to any responsibilities or delivery of service would entail changes to the National Parks Act. And so they have national obligation to consult as well as a local obligation to consult. And so the events that you mentioned, Councillor Demota, are part of Parks process to do that. And it is, to be clear, it is Parks Canada's public consultation process. As the municipality, we are a stakeholder in that consultation. Certainly, I think we want to encourage residents to be involved in that. And to that point, the municipality has been amplifying the message of Parks that these consultations are underway, and we want to encourage people to take part. I think we are being cautious, first off, not to send any mixed message that might indicate that it's the municipality's consultation, because it clearly is not. It's Parks Canada's consultation. And we want to ensure that the municipality has the full autonomy or right to have our own opinion. So Parks Canada will run their consultation, and they'll be able to hear from community members, and they will do up what we heard report to conclude that consultation. And I think as a municipality, we want to encourage people to be involved, and we want to reserve the right to continue to have our own opinions separately. And so we would like to comment on that, and we may do our own public consultation in addition to what Parks Canada is doing. So that's something that administration is considering. At this stage, we're working to make sure, using our available channels like social media and others, to ensure that the public is aware of this opportunity to participate. And we're not trying to put our thumb on the scale, so to speak, of what the public may say in that participation.
Thank you, Your Worship, if I may.
Yeah.
I appreciate that information, and that's good. I think my fear was that, you know, if there's a misunderstanding or miscommunication out within our community members and they're going through a consultation, and if there's any negative sentiment that might show up in, you know, in the report for Parks Canada, and if it comes back saying, well, the community members don't want this, so maybe it's not a good idea, then, you know, I would hate to see that data being formed on informed opinions, uninformed opinions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor DeMora. Any other comments or discussions with respect to the report from Parks Canada? If not, I would look to a member of council for a motion to receive the report for information. Councillor Melvin, is there any debate on that? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 5, delegations, of which there are none, and there is no one in the room other than our own hardworking staff. So I can move to agenda item 6, new business, and the director's report from our Director of Protective and Legislative Services, Ms. Madon.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Thank you for the opportunity to present on what's happening in our department and some important updates. Our capital projects for 2023 are all underway. Chief Conti and Deputy Chief Smith are playing a key role in advancing those items, and we're also working with the operations department for anything building related to make sure that we are all aligned in our approach, and things are progressing well, and every single project that was approved in 2023 is underway, so that is good news for us. We've secured at least one pickup truck that's getting outfitted to be used by the fire department. So that's a command unit that should be here in the spring in time for hazard season. So we're quite pleased to see that, because we've had a hard time procuring units, and we are on our way looking at a second one, but that is subject to a carry forward approval. So that will come next in the agenda. And our wildfire tactical plan is also another important project. We have one, but it is outdated, and there's been lots of progress in the province in the last few years with best practice and the ability to have teams from out of town to deploy to Jasper if we need them. And having a current wildfire tactical plan is very important for us. And it also ties into some equipment for our structural protection units, which are our trailers that can get deployed and that are full of sprinklers and hoses and pumps. And new pumps was one of our main requirements for 2023, which got approved in the capital budget. So that is also, those have been purchased, and we're also saving some of that budget to make sure that we can meet the requirements of our updated wildfire tactical plan once it's completed. There's another note in here about, we are a bit concerned about the increasing cost of capital projects, namely vehicles. We're pretty confident that in 2023, we'll be able to work within the budget that we have, but we are looking forward to 2024 and beyond, and the aerial truck is one of our main firefighting equipment will be due for replacement according to National Fire Protection Association standards. And what you see currently in the 5-year capital outlook is $800,000 over 2 years, so starting in 2024. We are concerned that this is not going to be enough funding. That is work that we have to complete between now and our capital request in the fall with budget. But essentially, the price of vehicles has been increasing significantly, and just due to supply and demand and materials and other things, but costs are increasing, and delivery times for those units are also changing quite a bit and becoming more extended. There's a note there about the Emergency Management Agency, so we continue to prepare for the upcoming wildfire season. And also the last note under our major projects is that we will be consolidating our offices at the fire hall, so we will all be in one building and being able to work together and increase our efficiencies. Also looking ahead at the upcoming wildfire season, there will be some benefits in having the team under one roof. And this move is temporary, and it is in the context of our space needs analysis is an item that is in the capital budget for 2023. So across the municipality, we're looking at our space, how much we need, what our plans are for the future, how many more staff or different programs or initiatives we might contemplate in the future. CAO Given is leading that project, and there will be a request for proposals issued shortly. And our goal is to have that information and that report completed by the end of 2023. And that would help us plan for capital projects in the future and see where we might go with our buildings, generally speaking. Under staffing, we have some good movement in the fire department. We are happy to announce that Kelly Dawson is our new captain of training and prevention. So that was a new position that was approved in the budget. And Kelly was an internal applicant and was the most qualified and has been working towards that position for some time. So we were quite happy to promote her into that role. And so this means that Captain Dawson's previous position of administrative assistant for the fire department is now changing. And that was also part of our pitch during the 2023 budget, that we are now posting for a protective services coordinator, which will take some of the duties that the admin assistant had, but also add some items for the bylaw department and also support us in emergency management. So the scope is becoming a bit broader, and this job posting should come out shortly. And other highlights, service trends, we have the sidewalk seating applications are out. There were no applications at the time of publishing the report, but I think there might be one that's actually coming. So we're working with businesses and answering questions and helping them through the permitting process. And also it's worth noting that some of the applicants from last year did get a 3-year approval because they met all of the requirements last year. So there are a few that will not require to apply again for another couple of years. And as council is aware, we brought it to the last committee of the whole meeting. Paid parking preparation and planning is underway, so we're getting ready for that. And of course, emergency preparedness as we head into spring is becoming more and more of a topic. We're working closely with the community development team and trying to reach our stakeholders as best as we can. And I can say that there will be a business-specific initiative to inform local businesses through NETMA. So the municipality community development specifically is hosting NETMA on March 15th. And the focus of the presentation will be on the upcoming renovation at our recreation facilities, but we will have a table off to the side with some information where we can discuss with businesses how they can best prepare for wildfire season. I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Don. I'll turn to questions right away. After I let Deputy Mayor Melnick know that the fine for that renewed phone shall be a donation to Councillor Waxer's fundraising efforts for coldest night of the year. Just so you know.
Should on a point of order. That wasn't a phone call, that was an alarm that Mr. Don was overtime. And I already contributed to that. So I feel we've been vindicated.
That doubles the fine. Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mayor Island. I have a couple questions. One about the truck that's needed. Can we sell the old truck to another country that maybe doesn't have the strict cut as we do? And how much more is it? Do you know how much it's going to be?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Hall. We do have a disposal of assets process. So when those assets go offline, can they be used in other areas? And to your point, perhaps another country where the standards are different. I couldn't tell you exactly how much we can expect to get for that unit, but certainly we would dispose of it through the regular process, which means we would get some money back somehow. But again, considering that it can't be purchased by anyone in Canada, sort of limits our ability to, I mean, it could be, but it can't serve as a frontline engine. So that's the NFPA standards there. And the aerial, it's the only one we have. Therefore, that's why it is subject to that 20-year replacement. And I do have some detailed notes from Chief Conte on explaining why we're suggesting that it's going to be a lot more. And essentially, we're in the process of finalizing our purchase for engine 2 right now. So that process has been a bit delayed, and that's what I said earlier, that we used to look at a 9-month turnaround to get a vehicle. We're now looking at an 18-month turnaround, so that the timelines have been quite extended, and that's why we haven't finished yet our engine 2 purchase. But the information we get from the manufacturer is that the cost of fire trucks has increased by 3% per month since November. So that's month after month, it increases 3%. And just generally speaking on other materials and equipment and turnout gear, in this case was the example we have, it's gone up 30 to 40% over last year to buy that equipment. So we're facing some challenges in our current operating budget for 2023. We think we're going to be okay, but certainly looking forward at those larger purchases for capital, we are anticipating more expenses. And the cost of supplies, the cost of aluminum, the cost of things that need to go on the truck to outfit it is all contributing to that. And the aerial is one of our more specialized units. It is used for accessing mostly 3rd floors. So imagine an apartment building or a hotel. So there are quite a few buildings in town that do fall into that category. And yeah, it's a highly specialized piece of equipment, and we don't have much of a choice but to purchase. There's only so many manufacturers that build fire trucks. And then there are customization options, but certainly taking a truck that is like a stock truck and picking from the models that they have available is very much where we're at, because otherwise the cost increase even more if you start customizing.
Go ahead, Councillor Hall.
I mean, just one more question. Thank you for that. My other question is regarding Troy Jackson, and he's going to attend some more programming. Can you just, I'm wondering if you can explain to me CPO designation, like what is kind of the order of how you become a police officer, or what that actually means?
Yes, Your Worship, through Councillor Hall, thank you for the question. It's an important one, and it relates to there's been a change in peace officer designations in Alberta over the last few years. So there was a fatality, someone on duty, and so the training requirements for peace officers have changed, and they are a lot more stringent now. And essentially, we're sending Mr. Jackson to an 11-week training in, I think it's Cold Lake, Lac La Biche. And it's our officer Laura Wells just graduated from that program in August. And essentially, we hire individuals in the bylaw officer position under the premise that they have to go and get trained and get certified as a CPO if they want to continue their employment in that fashion. So it's a condition of employment that we send them to training. And then we also enter into agreements with them that by training them, we then ask them to commit to a certain amount of time serving for the municipality. And that is how we get provincial designation for them to be certified as peace officers. And it is a health and safety matter. They can be dealing with all kinds of individuals and situations out there, and they need the right tools and the right knowledge to be able to perform the duties safely. And yeah, so we'll be sending Troy this spring, and that will be, so Mr. Jones got his CPO designation about 1.5 years ago. Then we have Officer Wells, and then we're looking forward to seeing Officer Jackson reach the same outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Sorry to do this to you, but I just want to go back to the aerial truck. So I just wanted clarification because I had a question from residents about a new ladder truck and why it was needed. Is it, long story, but is it because of approvals of third story buildings in the community? So my question, I guess, is the current ladder truck, so the current aerial, which is reaching 20 years, I think is what you're suggesting. So it's slated for replacement. The current ladder truck or aerial truck still has that capacity capability as well, so doesn't it? Or I guess the question from the resident is, variances such as third floor buildings are causing us to buy a new aerial truck to offer the same safety standard to those buildings. So, you understand my question? Yeah.
I do. Thanks for the question, Councillor Wilson. And Chief Conti gave me all that information because he's a lot more knowledgeable than I am about aerial trucks. But essentially, what's happening is the current aerial truck has a 75-foot ladder, and it's a ladder. It doesn't have a platform. It doesn't have a bucket, I think is another word that you could use for it. And so essentially, when the truck goes to a structure fire, say at a hotel or an apartment building. So there are lots of buildings in town that are currently 3 stories, and there may be more that are being developed, but they are in the same circumstance. So access of the fire truck. So how close can the fire truck actually get to the building has an impact on how that ladder gets deployed and how far it can reach. We currently have a 75-foot ladder. Chief Conti tells me that a 100-foot ladder is what we should be going for in the future or on the new truck, which we are scheduled to replace as per legislative requirements. And then the other question is whether a ladder truck that is similar to the current one we have, just with a longer ladder, versus one with a platform or a bucket. The main advantage of a platform or a bucket, and for fire departments across the province, I think that's the preferred approach, is that it's for access. So if a firefighter is in the bucket and has to action a fire that's on the roof somewhere, they're in an enclosed bucket versus standing on top of a ladder 75 feet above the fire truck and then having to climb on and off it. It's just a safer approach for firefighters to be on a platform or on a bucket. And the same goes for rescuing any individual that might be stuck on the 3rd story of a building that's in flames. And if we were to unload them onto the ladder, our current ladder truck, when the ladder is extended, you can't move it. So that means the person has to climb down the ladder and down the fire truck to get to the ground versus a aerial that has a bucket or a platform. We could load them in it and then move them down to the ground. So from a general public perspective in a rescue situation, from our firefighters' perspective, fighting fires, the health and safety considerations tell us that a truck with a platform would be the way to go. But could we still provide the service with a 100-foot ladder that is not a platform truck? That's a question that Chief Conti and I have to put our heads together, analyze, and come up with our recommendation for Capital 2024. But specifically to the question about buildings, there are several 3-story buildings in town right now, and the challenges are the same. So access and then height.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and the fact that you're legislated to replace the truck. There's not, we're not replacing the truck because of scenarios that are situations that are happening in the community, but we have the ability to upgrade the options on the truck because we're slated to replace it. So yeah, appreciate that and good information.
If I may just ask for some additional clarity on that. In what sense are we legislated? Whose legislation compels the specialized municipality of Jasper to get a new fire truck?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think you've asked this question before, and it is a good one, and it is the NFPA standards, which arguably is, are we legislated to change them? I think there's an insurance requirement that is pretty significant, as in could we still get insurance as a fire department if we didn't meet the National Fire Protection Association standards? There's something there, but to your point, what compels a municipality to abide by standards? I don't know that it's akin to safety codes, but it is is what we operate under as a fire department. Every fire department is subject to the same rules and they come from an FBA. That's, Chief Conti could answer that in more detail maybe, but that's my understanding. Mr. Given, my.
Thank you for that, and I will turn to Mr. Given. My thought is simply this, a number of us will be attending FCM later this year. This is a national issue that impacts municipalities everywhere. And I have struggled to understand the genesis of the problem. So I understand that if we don't meet standards, firstly, our residents and visitors are at risk. So that's the most compelling need. Also, there's the issue that you mentioned of insurance. But I still find it challenging to think that the National Fire Protection Association is in a position to legislate the type of truck that we might do. I'm just interested in investigating it further and seeing whether at a national level, there might be a working group that approaches this from a perspective of the economies of trying to run a small town with ever increasing capacity needs of fire engines, for example. Anyway, I'm sorry, Mr. Given, I cut you off and you were going to respond.
No, not at all, Your Worship. I just wanted to provide a little bit of clarification. I think there is likely a distinction between a standard and a legislative requirement. And we can do some research just to confirm that there is or isn't a legislative requirement. I'm not aware that there is a specific piece of provincial or federal legislation that says you must do this. There may be, so leave open that possibility. We can do that research and come back to council. But I think Director Nadal really got to it when she said that when there are standards in place that an industry has generally agreed are the appropriate standard, they become a de facto requirement in the eyes of insurers and others. And so municipalities by and large probably choose to conform with the standard out of respect for their level of risk tolerance. So explicitly choosing not to conform to an accepted standard may increase the municipality's exposure to risk should something happen. And you can appreciate that there's a few qualifiers in there, mays and if something were to happen, but maybe one of those cases, but that's certainly something administration can provide additional detail on if council's interested in exploring the issue.
Thank you for that personal comment. So unless council as a whole wishes to signify some desire for that, I am prepared to let it go. The only point I was trying to make is that the need for new equipment is driven by changing standards, not by changing development within the community. And I think that's a safe takeaway from your comments, Director Nadal. Thank you. Councillor Demota.
Well, I'm just wondering again if there's another opportunity for collective advocacy, because we probably are not the only community that faces these issues. And, you know, from my understanding and experience, and it might be wrong, to assume or understand that a lot of these standards are addressing demand in bigger metropolis areas, like in bigger cities and stuff. So the standards and turnovers of vehicles might be a lot more different in city of Edmonton, Calgary, or Toronto than it would be in the specialized resort. Oh, sorry, specialized needs that would be in Jasper. Almost got ahead of myself there by accident. But so like, and maybe some of these standards should be based on other things, like how much time is that vehicle or piece of equipment been in action, and or how many kilometers does it have on it, as opposed to putting a year date on it. Because if it only gets used 5 times in 20 years, then, you know, why should we be replacing something that's fairly new? Anyway, just an opportunity to maybe discuss. Thanks.
Councillor Malik, Deputy Mayor. No.
Thank you, Your Worship. One thing that I just would like to make the observation that the $800,000 a year over 2 years, 1.6. If we, in the future, to fund replacement vehicles, were to do that on an ongoing basis instead of over a 2-year period, we'd be able to spread that out in our tax base at $160,000 a year over 10 years. And I think that when we move into capital planning in 2024, we might want to take a look at these high cost items that we know are going to happen in 2028 or 2032 and start planning that we would put set aside a smaller amount of money every year, which will build to a capital reserve, as opposed to trying to do it over a short period of time. I think it might help the community from a annual tax burden, but also for us to be able to make adjustments as we see fire truck, for example, prices going up, then we could make a 10% adjustment in those monies that are set aside every year. I think that's a decision that we should maybe table for capital 2024 discussions.
Your Worship, if I may, and I know, I believe Director Malinchuk is on Zoom just first with the carried forward discussion. But so I'll go out on a limb here and sort of speak in her area. But I believe we would have to just make sure that we look carefully at the capital plan and the budget, because what you see reflected as the expenditure, the withdrawal from reserves, those reserves may have in fact been built up over time the way that you indicated. So we may have within the protective and legislative services or the fire department budget over a number of years had operational contributions to a reserve in expectation of this 2-year phased expenditure. So in the capital plan, we see the expenditure. We don't necessarily see, unless we look closely at the funding source, where, you know, where that money's coming from. And I don't have that specific one right at hand, but I believe it may be the case that at least a portion of that is actually funded from reserves that would have been built up over time, just like you described.
Mr. Don.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks for the question, Deputy Mayor Melnick. I'm happy to report that Mr. Van Tighem had the foresight of doing exactly that. So we do have the money in reserves for 1.6 for the replacement of the aerial. Now, if we're looking at a budget number that is greater than that, is where we'll have to get some financial planning together and see how we might fund it. But the fire department has a capital replacement schedule. So every time we buy a piece of equipment, we look at its lifespan and its cost of replacement, and that's how we build our number for transfers to reserves annually. And in 2023, I think we increased our transfer to reserves by $25,000 because we had that capital replacement schedule and we knew that we were close, but we weren't quite meeting that requirement. Now what's catching up with us is inflation, and the cost of items is consistently increasing. So that's a bit harder to navigate, but that's the case for all our fleet and all of our equipment as well. So the new equipment that we're purchasing for our structural protection units has been added to our capital replacement schedule. And that is best practice in fire departments that Chief Conti is on top of and that Chief Van Tighem started before.
Thank you all for that discussion. Thank you, Mr. Don, for the report. Councillor Demota, you another question? Go ahead.
Not a question, but a comment for council, in particular for the ones that were unavailable for committee of the whole last week. There was an observation made that there was a value that was calculated for a parking stall in regards to what was collected last year for parking revenue. And I knew that at one point there was a desire from council, or at least some councillors, to use that as an observation to what we were going to attach as a value for commercial use of public space. And for my observation, the numbers that we're charging in comparison to what was collected last year on average per stall, in particular the commercial area downtown on Canot and Patricia Street. Very little, but that also might change if council decides to attach a different dollar value to per hour use. So I'm just prepping you for the conversation next week, because I think it's coming up in front of us again. Thank you.
Thank you for that. If there are no further questions or observations or comments with respect to the report from the Director of Protective and Legislative Services, might I have a motion to have council accept that report for information? Councillor Keller-Hempy? Thank you. I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you again for that. That takes us to agenda item 6.2, capital budget carry forwards to 2023. And Mr. Given, you indicated that Director Alanchuk can appear on screen for us.
Yes, Your Worship, I believe she can, and I'll say that this item was previously at committee and has been recommended forward by committee to council here today. The report, the covering report, I believe is attached. That spells out the general context of the items here, and I'm not sure the nature of the conversation last week as I was away with yourself and Councillor Wilson. But Director Malinchuk is there on screen to answer any questions that council may have. The recommendation from committee is that council approve the carry forward capital list of incomplete 2022 projects for the 2023 capital budget as presented.
Thank you for that. Are there questions of Director Malinchuk or Mr. Given with respect to the request? Councillor Wilson?
Just interested what the Affordable Housing Initiative line item is. And where was that? Yeah, 200,000. I think there's 151,000 being carried forward. I'm just looking for what it is. Is that?
Your Worship, I'll refer that to Director Malinchuk. I know she has all the details at hand.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Wilson. That is in regards to a study that has been ongoing, also with led by Collier's group. So that has just some remaining funds that could move forward to the next year to continue that studying on our housing and its initiatives going forward.
Your Worship, I can supply a little bit more information. As council approved early this year, administration is doing some work on the governance options for the JCHC. We have re-engaged some external supports for that. And we're going to be having a presentation and update coming to council next week, actually. That'll give you a little bit of an idea of the status of that work. So it is, well, it is not a physical item. It is one-time work of a fairly large nature. And so that's why administration is recommending carrying forward these funds so we can continue to apply them to that foundational work, even though it's intellectual foundation rather than a physical foundation.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Just, yeah, now gives me the idea of where that is and what we're getting out of it. Appreciate that.
Councillor DeMoy.
There's one item, although small, that it's more for inquiry and information, not to question why it's there, is the paper shredder under administration, even though that it's a small amount under at $8,000 in the grand scheme of things. That does sound small, but 8,000 for a paper shredder sounds quite extravagant. And I'm assuming that that's to take care of a lot of our local documents that we normally use an external service to shred for us, and that would give us quite a bit of cost saving. minus, human resources to shred those. So was that the intention of that there?
Your worship, through to Councillor Demota, yes, that was anticipated to come in a lot higher, but we were lucky to find something that was actually came under budget. So, and it is required to, we get rid of any information that in the finance office that has any kind of numerical values and whatnot instantly, basically, so that they're not sitting around in a recycling bin, whatnot. Yes, it would cut down on the costs of the hired solution that comes once a year. So continuously we're doing that. And we actually were fortunate enough to also send our older unit on to another department that should be getting rid of also their information on a daily process.
Fortunately, you can't put the ladder in a bucket on the end of that. I'm glad we're able to repurpose some other equipment in this value. Thank you.
This Malchuk was unfortunately absent for the committee of the whole discussion on this matter. I hate to have you repeat information that you may have given a week ago, but can you just tell me in general terms what the column that is headed 2022 estimated means? Is that all capital budget items for 2022 in that column?
Your worship, no, we're talking about the, during the budget presentation, we gave an estimated amount of carry forward items that we would be looking at carrying forward into the 2023 year. Those amounts were the full budgeted amounts. So obviously you see that they've reduced quite a bit. We were waiting for all the final numbers to come in, all the invoices and whatnot. So the adjusted 2022 to 2023 request is the amount that would be going to the 23 budget instead of the numbers that you saw during the budget presentation times.
All right, so 15.75 million rather than 19.5 million as a carry forward amount.
Yes, and it was just we brought forward the budgeted amount, not an actual estimate of where we were at that moment. We brought through, these are the amounts that we budgeted in 2022. This is the amount that we need to bring through in 2023.
In that case, then, it seems to me that it is a large amount, 80% roughly, is being carried forward. From your experience, is that more or less typical, or at least within the range? And what does it point to if we budget items and then carry forward 80% of them on a regular basis?
Your worship, with this year, the number is quite large, and we've seen quite a large number in the past few years. It is directly related to our ongoing project with the the recreation center renovation, as well as the wastewater treatment plant that has ongoing major renovations. It's over 20 years as well. So those are the bigger figures that you see carrying into the next year. Although those are proceeding very well now, and we should be expending a lot of those funds in 2023. And looking forward to, we'll be spending lots of that money in the 2023 budget. Unfortunately, the projects just have taken longer than anticipated initially.
Fair enough, and so it's circumstances, some of them perhaps internal, but more external, rather than a systemic approach that we should be looking at. This will solve itself over time.
Correct. As in the report, there's 90% of this has already is work in progress, so it has begun.
Thank you, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Following up a bit on your questioning, I just really want to understand this chart. So just the very first line, estimated was 300,000. move forward request is 100,000, does that mean we over budgeted by 200,000, or do we already spend 200,000? Because I'm seeing some that have 0 requests to carry forward. Does that mean that that project's complete or not happening? Or what does it mean?
Okay, your worship, through to Councillor Hall. So if you're looking at the first line, for example, the 300, and now we're bringing over $99,619, that means that the 200 was spent, and we're bringing over the remaining dollars that were not spent to conclude the project. If we were initially estimating that there was, say, for instance, the 27 in the ball diamond bleachers, that was fully expended and no further dollars will be remaining to be brought over into 2023. Therefore, you know, we weren't sure if we were have everything in place by year end. It's in place. It's taken care of. Nothing's brought over to 2023.
Thank you.
CAO Gibbon.
Yeah, your worship, just want to come back to your question about sort of the amount that's being carried over. So administration, Director Malinchuk's lead and others that were here before me applied for a grant that we received a number of years ago. Council member, that was, I think, 2019. We've been carrying it on our books, the project on our books for quite some time. This council and the previous one were really involved in getting that project underway. We just moved into the phase where we're going to start spending the real dollars. And so you'll see that about $10.7 million of our $15 million that we're asking to carry forward is the renovation project at the activity and fitness complex. So, and of the 5 million that's left, 2.5 of that is water treatment plant. So really the amount of projects that we requested funds for that, you know, that weren't able to be fully complete by the end of the year is something closer to $2.5 million. So just in terms of context, I think we just really need to acknowledge how large that activity center renovation project is. And as Director Malinchuk highlighted, we are hitting the phase now where we're going to start procurements, and the disruption will start and start to send the dollars. So you'll see that drawdown happen pretty quickly over 2023. Although not completely, there will still be some of those capital dollars that will flow into 2024 as well.
Thank you for that. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, Mr. Gibbon, I'm just going to go to the grounds portion and the log cabin portion of renovations, and the whole amount was carried forward. I seem to recall Director Reed talking about the fact that that particular building had money budgeted, but we hadn't really, the administration hadn't really determined what would be the best use of that building. Was that correct? So is there some possibility that might need more funds, or that those funds may not be expended?
I'll maybe refer to Director Malinchuk as well, and Natasha, I'll give you a chance just to sort of collect your thoughts. This item was a portion of the overall grant application that we did to the federal government along with the activity center renovation. I don't think that the portion related to the log cabin was as well scoped in terms of the level of detail of what we intended to do. And so it has sort of languished, frankly, while the focus is being on the larger project of the activity center. Administration wants to have a look at that over the course of this year so that we can either have a good plan for you that we can recommend, and actually acting on, or by the time we come back to you in the fall, we have some recommendations for reallocation of that, because there are some already dedicated dollars, and I'm not sure about the proportion of grant dollars versus municipal tax dollars, but there are dollars that are being held up that could be reallocated to some other project if needed. Obviously, the log cabin is starting to show its age, even just at the surface level, but administration can with confidence say right now that $200,000 will do it, or what the scope of work exactly would be. Because I think at the time, the administrative team said, this is a facility that needs some improvement, accessibility improvements included. There's a federal grant application that will do that. Let's put it in there. And we got some money, which was great, but we didn't have a defined project scope of what exactly we wanted to do, and that's made it difficult to proceed.
Thank you, Councillor Keller.
Thank you, Mayor Arnott. I'd just like to follow up on that. I seem to recall, and I may be wrong, but when the application was put in, I was under the understanding that we weren't allowed to reallocate those dollars, that they had to be used for the project that was described in the application.
Your worship, so we, and again, that's where I want to confirm, and this is what we would do a budget, is to confirm whether we, nominally dedicated the federal government dollars to the activity center project, which is fully in scope and was in the application, or if we'd have the ability to shift around and say, well, the 200,000 was actually municipal tax dollars, so it doesn't impact the federal grant. So we have some flexibility that way. I think also now, we would have if we needed to work with the federal government as a funder to cut portions of the things that we had applied for so that we could get our dollars to go further, that might also be possible. I think it would be very challenging to say, well, there's something that we never applied for and we'd like to reallocate this to some new thing. Probably not a good chance of that, but if we did need to reallocate to the activity center renovation project, appreciating that we've seen some significant inflation over time, I'd like to have that flexibility. That's the type of discussion I would be comfortable having with the funder, and I think we'd have some potential for. But again, that's something we reflect to a budget, and as we get more detail about how the activity center renovation project is going.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon, for the explanation.
If there are no further questions, Councillor DeBona.
I'd like to move the council approve and carry forward capital list of incomplete 2022 projects to the 2023 capital budget as presented.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor DeBona. In the absence of debate, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you, Mrs. Malinchuk, for that report and your work to prepare it. That takes us to agenda item 6.3, Alberta Francophone Proclamation request. Mr. Gibbon, did anyone intend to speak to that, or is it self-explanatory?
Your worship, administration didn't expect to speak to this, but you can see the request there from the ACFA. We do have a policy that defines how and when these requests need to come in. And I believe that this letter of request meets the standard set policy.
Thank you for that. Councillor Waxer.
I'd be willing to make the motion that council proclaim March as the annual mois de la francophonie albertaine.
Thank you for that. Councillor Waxer, just speaking in favor of the motion, I did in fact attend the flag raising on March 2nd at the Col de Rocher to mark the beginning of the month, and I was joined there by our Member of Parliament, Mr. Soroka. There's no debate. I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is passed, and I will so proclaim the month of March as the annual Mois de la Francophonie albertaine in Jasper. And if there is a proclamation to that effect, I can sign that later on today. Thank you. Agenda item 7, notices of motion. Councillor DeMota, you indicated that you wish to speak to a notice of motion.
Yes, actually, and it's not really a notice of motion, it's just an agenda item added for next week. And although I believe our agenda is going to be quite full, it's just a marker there to indicate that we might have some opportunities at maybe various levels, but in particular provincially with Alberta municipalities. And the conversation came up because of the step back in funding from the province towards, people experiencing trauma that weren't victims of crime in our community. And so there might be an opportunity there to advocate for some more funding in that area. And some of us believe that Alberta Beauties could be that. But then because there's a cutoff for resolutions, we thought it might be a good idea if anybody else had ideas for resolutions to bring them forward, and maybe not talk about them next week, but I'd like to get ahead of it so that we're not chasing the deadline, which is usually, I think, around the end of May. So that just gives us an opportunity. And I think another one, that might be touching us here is some advocacy for rent control in the province. And I think that's an important topic, giving, some of the conversations that are transpiring in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Demota. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Can I ask a question about last week's meeting? I did tune in to listen. Was there a motion made about that, or was it not made? Or
Yeah.
I feel like there was.
Sorry, I did, and I'm just, the reason I'm bringing it up, it's in the minutes. I think if you look at the minutes, it was under 87/23. There was a motion made by Councillor Keller MP that we direct administration to add the following item to the next committee, the whole agenda meeting agenda, Alberta Municipalities Association 2023 topics for resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Is there any other councillor who wishes to speak on agenda item 7, notices of motion? If not, then I will turn to agenda item 8, councillor reports. And I will welcome reports from councillors as to their commitments recently. Councillor, or new Deputy Mayor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would report that last Thursday I attended the Community Futures West Yellowhead monthly meeting, and one of the items of note was the concern regarding the RRF loans that are in the province and in the community. RRF meaning the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund loans that were made during the COVID period, which are coming due at the end of the fiscal year. And Community Futures across the province is working with individuals who have taken out the loans to make sure they're preparing to be able to either pay those back on time, or to make plans to be able to do incremental payments. The program was extended, I believe, one more year, which would terminate at the end of this year. There is concern within Community Futures that there'll be a number of loans that will go into default. This information is now public information. The report is public, and it's on the Community Futures West Yellowhead website. And I believe councillors have been emailed the report and the summary that was presented to us last Thursday.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Melnick. Other reports? Councillor Wilson.
Well, myself, as well as Mayor Ireland and Mr. Given, had the opportunity to attend the Tourism Industry Association of Alberta conference in Edmonton on Tuesday of last week. A lot of good representation there for our primary industry, and I felt it to be a really great place to advocate for our municipality and the challenges we have as a tourism industry, or tourism destination, and I don't want to really speak too much longer. I'll let Mayor Allen kind of update us on what you got up to at that conference as well.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I will include that in my report. February 22nd, ongoing Wednesday meetings with our colleagues in Banff and Canmore related to the tourism-based community initiative. So I attended that Wednesday, the 22nd of February. Also managed to make it to NETNA that evening. Didn't see my friends there. Well, other friends, but not friends from this table. Joined Councillor Wilson and CAO Given for that Tourism Industry Association Tourism Advocacy Summit. And so it was really opportune because it was a summit devoted to advocating on behalf of the tourism industry. But we were there to advocate on behalf of our tourism-based community, which is a subset within the larger scale. And so we started on the Sunday evening with a really good opportunity to meet with Tourism Jasper and their counterparts in Banff Lake Louise and Banff Lake Louise Tourism Bureau, and the same tourism marketing organization in Canmore, which I think is Kananaskis Canmore something. In any event, the representatives of those three associations were there, and we had a really good opportunity to lay out our goals and our strategy in respect to advocating on behalf of tourism-based communities in the province. And I think it was a success in the sense that we conveyed the necessary information to operators in all three jurisdictions and really seized upon the opportunity to build support and allies there. And then that carried on through the 2 days of the summit with the larger body. An excellent event in that they had panels which included the Premier and the Minister of Tourism and included the leader of the opposition. So they drew a good crowd, and the discussions were really relevant to our circumstances. Really a wealth of information and worth attending. On the 28th, the last day of that summit, I was also invited to be a guest of our MLA, Martin Lawn, for a question period and for the presentation of the provincial budget. So I sat through that, and it was interesting to be there. March 1st, we were back at it again with our colleagues in Banff and Canmore to debrief the tourism summit. Also, as many of you will be aware, there was a local issue with respect to a rent increase, as intimated by Councillor Demota earlier today. I did an interview with CBC on March 1st about that. I've yet to hear that. I don't know whether it was ever aired. What was it?
Tonight.
Oh, tonight.
Yeah, that's fine.
Although I understand the factual situation has perhaps changed by now as well. March 1st, I also attended the seniors community conversation. For those interested, I could give some details, but that is ongoing, and it continues to be an opportunity to hear from a segment of the community, but a segment that is also interested in all other segments and connected to them. So that was worthwhile. And as I indicated earlier, March 2nd, I attended the raising of the Franco-Albertan flag at École de Rocher in company with our Member of Parliament. And that is my report. If there are no other reports, I will turn to, I'm sorry, Councillor Demota.
I attended the community conversations, adult age discussion last Wednesday between 2 and 3 p.m. we had members of our local RCMP there, other agency members in the community, as well as the new officer assigned to, I think, community outreach and well-being. I forget the exact title of that RCMP position, but she was the new person assigned and waiting for their nurse to be assigned to the area too. So we got a little bit of insight on that. Some of the bigger, higher levels of conversation was advocacy for rent control in the community, because a lot of people are already feeling stressed, regardless of some of the news coming out about one of the larger accommodation providers in the community. As well as some discussion came up on the paid parking program, and the RCMP officers indicated that they did get a lot of questions over the last couple of years on where people can pay if their phones weren't working. And, you know, I said that there is a move to get some more kiosks within the community. And perhaps if we can have a conversation about adding even more, hearing what I heard. So there's a lot of people that visit here that don't have the special phone packages sometimes for data, and require the use of kiosks, more kiosks. So just thought I'd bring that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeVota. And if there are no further council reports, I will turn to agenda item 9, upcoming events. International Women's Day event tomorrow, Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce General Meeting at the Wicked Cup on March 15th. The Parks Canada public information sessions on March 16th. Mr. Gibbon, I believe that there is also on the 15th an opportunity to meet for councillors to meet Parks Canada with respect to that. Can you confirm the time and place?
Your worship, that is a private meeting for council and Parks Canada, as council, obviously, the municipality is one specific stakeholder. It should be in council members' calendars. And the meeting is scheduled for 3 p.m. At the Parks Canada in
Thank you for that. This month, in this room on March 22nd, commencing at 5 o'clock. And for the benefit of councillors, is there an intergovernmental meeting this month? Are there any other upcoming events of which council should be made aware? If not, that is all just for information, which takes us to agenda item 10. And if I might have a motion from a councillor, that council move in camera at 2:55 p.m. Councillor Wilson, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. We will move in camera, and I will let members of the public and other staff who are connected through the internet to these proceedings that it is unlikely that there will be any business to discuss coming out of our in-camera session other than adjournment. So for those who feel that they should leave, this is probably the best time to do that. But thank you for your attendance, and we are now moving in camera and will conclude in public session after that in-camera session is over.